Hello and welcome back to Massalia Tales. In the previous episode, we attacked Rome, and in a large grinding battle teaming up with the Hellenic League, we were able to conquer the defenders thanks to the bravery and skill of the Massalian troops. That meant Rome was ours to decide what to do with, and I ended up giving it back to the original Romani faction. So Rome now rises again as our military ally, freed from the occupation of the Illyrian Confederation. In the Far East, we had a battle near Charax, where Actor was easily able to capture that settlement from the Egyptians. There were also other sieges going on in the area, which are being set up for battles coming very soon. But then we saw our fleet in the Western Mediterranean, led by Cronos, being attacked by Carthaginian fleets and generals. He tried to escape battle, but ended up getting into exactly the situation he was trying to run from, so now he has to put up a last stand. Part of the reason Massalia was able to build momentum was that all of their forces could be committed to offensives without worrying about defending borders elsewhere. This was only possible thanks to the aid of two of Massalia's client states, the Cimbri and the Scordisci tribes, both providing countless thousands of troops to defend the Massalian core. But this left the Timucoi with a dilemma, as now they would be forced to agree to any demands these tribes had. The armies they had provided were a blade on the throat of the Republic if turned. Their demands were not harsh, but to provide any unwarranted resources to their allies was not the want of the Timucoi in the post-Executor era. Predictably, tensions started to rise on their open borders. So Cronos now leads our fleet, the Vengers of Atlantis, in a stand against the Carthaginian attackers, who very kindly have deployed a land army at sea as their first wave. They've also got this kind of sea monster creature. You've seen these before in sea battles. I think it's some sort of recurring glitch that sometimes many of the enemy troops like to just stand in the middle of the battle sea and glitch together. Not 100% sure what that actually is caused by, since none of the enemy ships appear to not have their crews on them, so I don't know, maybe it's one guy from every ship. But anyway, as the battle starts, our artillery ships will be able to hit some of these enemy transports. It's really useful of the enemy to send their transports in the first wave, of course, because transports are super weak against being rammed by warships. So that means we can just ram into all of them as the battle starts to try and do maximum damage before the battle with the enemy's fleet actually begins. So we're going to get a chance to get some free kills, essentially. The artillery doing a good job as well. They can take out these ships from very far away. So in we come. We're going to try and just sink as many enemy ships before things start getting dangerous as we can. A single ramming action enough to destroy a transport, especially from these larger ships, of which we have quite a few, and the smaller ships going to dart forward more quickly to hit these guys at the back here. This ram doesn't actually do anything. I think I accidentally told them to board, and when you order a boarding action, the ram doesn't do any damage, even though it still does the whole ramming animation thing. Anyway, other ships having more luck actually taking down the enemy ship, so entire enemy units just being obliterated at once. And what I'm trying to do is distract the enemy's main fleet so that they will arrive a little bit later to the battle between my fleet and the transport. So I've sent two ships to just go and sail among the enemy fleet to just stop any warships we can from getting in. Unfortunately, it didn't really work, and a few of the enemy's larger ships are getting through. Here you can see a ramming action against some of our big tower ships. Not good at all. They're going to go down, unfortunately, due to the size of the enemy ships that are ramming them. They can take lots of rams from smaller ships, but the enemy fleet is very powerful. So now both sides starting to take casualties, as in this general mess, both sides are kind of just ramming each other. But since transport ships can't ram, they're at a fundamental disadvantage. So we can either just ram them or just shoot the crew from afar using javelins and arrows, which works pretty well as well. So in the middle, lots of ships on fire, and our general's tower ship trying to get a ramming action, but we have a situation where it's so clogged with sinking ships that it's hard to actually move and get any ramming going. This ship's sinking. The enemy had boarded it, but they refuse to leave the ship even as it sinks. My troop's going to leave, but unfortunately the enemy looks like they're going to go down with their capture. They're not the best move from the Carthaginian Marines, unfortunately. Now this is the ship of Cronos. It's going to take heavy fire now because it's basically surrounded by enemy ships. It's also taking friendly fire from the siege ships, but hard to avoid when all the ships are so close together. So as you can see from the balance bar and just the general number of ships that are on the sea right now, the enemy have a fundamental advantage, but we're still going to try and take as many of them with us as we can. When the enemy board our large ships, they send multiple transports to board them at once. It gives me a chance because the stationary transports, while the crew are away doing the boarding action, can still be rammed, and that does still kill the crew because they'll jump back off the ship they were on onto their own sinking ship and then just sink with it, because that's just how it works in this game. They didn't really think that through. And the whole time this is going on, my two siege ships are getting excellent shots on the enemy because they're just being ignored basically. The enemy don't care about the siege ships, so we're just raining flaming shot onto the enemy. Unfortunately, our admiral's ship has now been set ablaze, so the crew are going to abandon it. Well, at least they're trying to abandon it. Some of them actually jumped onto enemy ships by accident, but at this stage our best ship is sinking and it's being totally swarmed by enemy ships. The only advantage to which is that my siege ships are having a hard time missing, because there's so many ships right next to each other. We can just rain fire in the general area and always hit something. Meanwhile, the distraction tactic is kind of still working. I've got two ships out here stopping many of the enemy's craft from coming to get involved, but it wasn't enough. We've already lost basically our entire fleet to the enemy's attacks. Generally, it's hard to fight the AI in a naval battle because they can micro the ramming more than you can, so in even battles you do still tend to lose. Luckily the siege ships still doing decent damage. This transport ship just floundering. It's stuck because there's so many ship carcasses just below the surface. It can barely move from where it is, so I'm just taking it out with the siege shots, and that ship takes a weird physics dive as it gets hit, turns in the direction opposite to the direction it was hit in, and then the crew decide to abandon it as it goes down. So we've actually wiped out basically the entire army from the starting deployment. Most of the ships here are now the navy. All the original ships have been sunk, which is fantastic news, but the battle is now going to end for us. Here, one of our final large ships fighting on the marines, engaging the enemy amid a huge carpet of their comrades. The ship is on fire, and the Carthaginians do know this, so they're trying to get off it before it sinks, but having a hard time because there's so many guys. It's just hard to escape. So finally, the enemy decided to come and fight with my siege ships. Here you can see this massive tower ship just looming over the siege craft, and it's going to be pretty easy for them to just take it. So the battle coming to an end, balance bar not looking too favourable, and the siege crew are just going to rout in the face of this attack. The advantage here is actually that when a ship routs, even when it's being boarded, it counts as escaping if the battle ends when it routs. So we'll see in a moment that both of these two ships actually survive somehow, because technically what we just saw didn't count as them being captured or anything like that. So the battle is over, but a big cost for the enemy. It doesn't read well, my lords. The latest report is that the city guard were so eager to witness the vengeance of Atlantis' doom that they sailed out to support the fleet. But the enemy turned about in such a way that our troops, sailing in whatever old craft they could procure along the coast, were set upon by the enemy warships. The report says that virtually all were lost in the ensuing chaos before our fleet arrived and destroyed the Massalians as originally predicted. The foolishness of our men leaves the city unguarded, with talk that the Daemons of Polemos have vowed to march straight to this very chamber. It is hard to know if the idiocy of man or the trickery of the gods is to blame for this. So here's the result. Our fleet all destroyed but for those siege ships somehow getting away from that situation, and the enemy's first army there totally wiped out but for one ship. The navy taking a bit of damage, but overall in good health. They'll probably just re-recruit those ships over the next turn. But that destruction of their army is very nice. It had so many experienced troops in it as well, and they have just gone right to the briny deep for really no reason. They just sacrificed them against our fleet. So now those two siege ships are going to somehow escape despite being out of movement points, and they actually escape quite far, and Carthage don't chase them down, so obviously they managed to escape out of the range of everything else, which is fantastic news. So that means the vengeance of Atlantis will actually continue on. They can sail back to be rebuilt. I think I have shipbuilding facilities in Tingis, so we should be able to get some high level ships once again. So moving through the rest of the end turn sequence, the Egyptians don't do anything against us, which is fantastic news. I expected them to make some sort of attacks in the east, but they still haven't come, so I don't know exactly what they're up to. Now the Illyrian Confederation offer peace if I give them a small amount of money, easily enough to afford. Of course, a bit of an outrageous deal considering how the war's gone so far. They should be making a concession to me. They reject the offer to be my client state, and now they make an attack against me. You may remember that Cronos had them under siege in southern Italy. So they come out with an army and the garrison army inside. The army is only small though. They have a giant advantage on the balance bar, and they have lots of troops, lots of experience as well. So actually a pretty good garrison. But overall, not terribly worried about it, because even though the balance bar suggests this would be hard, we've seen countless times that having lots of high quality troops with low morale doesn't really get you very far, and the balance bar doesn't necessarily take that into account. So we'll just give them a nice field battle. Now to start with, I'm just putting my formation randomly here because I'm going to shift it up right away because the enemy general and his army are actually coming in by sea for this battle. So I wanted to work out where they were going to land first of all and then plan accordingly to try and stop them. Ideally you want to stop them separate to the enemy's garrison army. So you can see I started moving these legionaries down to face the apparent landing direction of the enemy, but their garrison army actually somehow comes onto the field behind my deployment zone. So that wasn't expected given the campaign map, but there they are. So we're going to have to adjust for that, and that is going to mean I have to abandon my plan to go down the hill and face their landing forces, otherwise I'll just get sandwiched between the enemy's two groups. So instead we're going to try and rush up this hill that we're on to get up and above the place where the enemy's garrison army is coming in, so they'll be forced to run uphill towards our line. And that happens easily enough, we just about set up in time. So I put a big pike wall right in front of the enemy's garrison army, and they are still just walking right towards it. We've also got the red line of death on our right flank. Normally a bit cheeky to use the red line to defend your flanks, but since this is actually the best bit of terrain on the map, I usually allow myself to do it in these situations. So in comes the enemy's garrison. We've got lots of javelineers, which are of course a potential threat to the pike line because they could just stand there and throw at the pikes, but of course they're not going to bother that. Perhaps they don't know. They're just going to rush in with the infantry and fight the pikes head on, which is going to do absolutely nothing, so fine by me. So they just charge in and basically bounce off the pike wall because they can't get close enough to fight us, and now it's just going to be a standoff while my javelineers and archers shoot them while they're standing there. Now on my left side, all of my legionaries are starting to fold around because I realised the enemy might actually outflank me because they have so many troops, so just formed a big line of legionaries to face off against them, but they actually didn't attack. As you can see, they just stood there and looked at them with that group of troops. So I eventually got bored and decided myself to go on the offensive. Since we are actually a little bit uphill of the enemy, it might even be in my advantage to just charge at them. We are going to take javelins as we go, but you can see the legionaries have this light speed javelin throw they can use to fire back, killing some of the enemy who will now start running away from the legionaries, not wishing to start getting into melee with them. That means that the melee troops left behind are going to get totally surrounded, so that is lovely. I've also got cavalry behind the enemy's army now, hoping to make rear attacks, but being a little bit disrupted by the fact that the enemy's units are starting to rout off the pike phalanx and are getting in the way because the cavalry get caught on those routing units. So anyway, the enemy's javelineers were the prime target for the cav, but there were so many javelin units that I couldn't target them all, and as you can see there, we take a lot of damage when I go and target one jav unit. The jav unit next door just turns and throws into the back of the cavalry. So actually a little bit dangerous. It's the sort of thing you see in Attila quite a lot, where cavalry units really struggle against skirmisher units if they're in multiple groups. So my guy's getting bogged down fighting the javelineers. Luckily, the other javelineers just skirmished away. They attacked this other unit though, not doing very much damage this time, but still really annoying. Need to micro these cav more to keep those javs moving and stop them from throwing. Further down the hill, there's a couple of open melees happening here. We've got some one-on-ones going on, where the enemy's unit is just trying to fight the legionaries in melee, but absolutely fine by me, definitely going to win out, and eventually we'll be able to go and support them because we're starting to win in the main fight up here as well. These axe troops, these garrison troops, kind of decent, but just nothing compared to the legionaries, so really don't have any chances. Of course, up at the pike phalanx, the enemy never managed to reduce its stability enough to actually fight my troops, other than the pike troops who went out to fight with their swords, because sometimes they like to do that. So eventually I told the pike phalanx to just start creeping forward down the hill. We can just start pushing all the way down, where we need to come and support these melees, because the enemy's reinforcements coming in bit by bit are going to be threatening to outflank many of these isolated units. I've got one unit basically facing the entire enemy landing force just to stop it from coming and joining the battle. It's coming in a big column, many of them actually waiting back here at the boats, including this one guy who annoyingly has the flag for his unit over the top of him, which means I can't really see his unit in the main fight, but I guess this guy didn't like the look of the fight going on up on that hill, so decided to just wait here and awkwardly stare it out. I think he's got the 1,000 yards there. He's probably already seen a fair few battles before and didn't really want to fight again. Their commander also waiting by these ships doing absolutely nothing, and some of the ships doing a classic Rome 2 glitch of getting stuck in the land, now trying to sneak back out to sea before anyone notices, but it's too late. I have seen it happening, but it means those units aren't taking part in the battle, of course, and not really helping their comrades who are now increasingly in trouble as the advance of the pike phalanx means that now they're going to get rear flanked by lots of men with long sticks, and they're not even turning to face them, so it's going absolutely great. The pike phalanx is actually glitching out itself a little bit, but not quite enough to cause as many issues as the glitches are causing for the enemy. So as they finally make contact, the enemy unit routes, and all of those landing forces are basically all fighting against one unit of legionaries, which has now formed into the hollow square formation. The special formation of legionaries which we saw recently, which makes them invulnerable to being flanked or taking morale or combat penalties from being flanked, which is great because they are being flanked from all sides at the moment. This unit making a very tired yet enthusiastic sort of charge, giving up at the last second and then deciding to go into melee. So about the least effective charge they possibly could have done, presenting their flank now to the legionaries streaming down the hill as reinforcements. We need to go and support that square, and the legionary comrades not going to allow that square to get overwhelmed. We can hit the enemy in the flanks on both sides of the square with new legionary units, and the pike phalanx going to slowly come up behind as well. Overall, we've got a decent chance to totally overwhelm the enemy. I wonder when it was the Illyrians started preparing their men to fight us. A good enough job. They've made us break formation, they've got us down from the hill, but now they must see the difference between opening a door and walking through it. Puts me at ease anyway. First we hear of poor Cronos and Carthage taking sea control, and then these amateurs steal a march on us with greater numbers. A moment of weakness is enough to squander 1,000 victories. Our enemies will attest that much. Fortunately, Poseidon has floundered their ships down there. Their commander hasn't even sent a single runner to his main force. Sorry, I don't want to sound sad that the enemy makes so many mistakes. It's just that there's a certain shame in defeating an opponent so poorly matched. With the enemy all concentrated together into several blocks, it's nice and easy for me to come in and finish them off with rear attacks. So here we go, smashing some cav into the back of these spearmen pressed at the front against a pike phalanx. They make the decision to leave. Probably a good one, but they're going to struggle to leave from such a surrounded position. Nearby, the rest of their troops are all blobbed together as well, and interestingly, we see some guys leaving without actually routing. Now, I thought this was very interesting because it's actually the right thing to do from the AI. They should get out of the way, they shouldn't just wait for me to surround and destroy them. However, I'm fairly certain it was a glitch because I've never seen the AI actually attempt to not get surrounded like that. I think those guys are just going to run and join their commander down with the beach. So, once those guys have left, the rest of them who didn't decide to leave are going to get taken out. In come the legionaries for the rear attack, and we've got some cav coming around to sort them out as well. So at this stage the battle pretty much won, but you can see the enemy still has a decent portion on the balance bar because of all their odd units just hanging around across the battlefield. So I need to try and find a couple of them and take them out so that the rest will just chain route, but you might guess that's going to be very easy, so we'll skip that part, and there we go, heroic victory once the rest finally surrender to us. A victory that means the garrison of Brundisium, the city we had under siege, is now pretty much decimated and wiped out, so we should be able to go in and take it in the next turn. Nice of the Illyrians to gift us so many victories like this. It's proven very easy to take all of these long established territories from them. So you can see the damage to Acronius, really nothing. All the damage you see there is mostly stuff that was already there from the previous battles because he wasn't at full strength for this battle. So anyway, we're going to release the captives that we did take and just see how that resolves in the beginning of the next turn. No more action from the Illyrians, they had no more attacks to make. Now at the start of the next turn we have a new enemy, the Nasamones, that's an African faction. Now so I was just clicking through all of these news things that always come up. I accidentally went through one that was actually important, making the replacement for the Admiral of the Vengeance of Atlantis. So annoying that so many things pop up that I usually just ignore them instinctively, and sometimes there is an important one in there. So let's jump over and have a look at this guy. His name was Arabios, I think. He's nothing particularly special, he's just a level 1 general. He's got two conflicting traits here. He's a troop mascot, which gives him increased authority, and he's got a drunken wife, which decreases his authority. And overall the balance is that he's actually not very good as an officer at all. He has very low stats across the board, but not really important right now. He just needs someone to take the two surviving siege ships back to port and start recruiting new troops, and he's going to suffice for that. So we're going to head over to Eol. In Tingers, as I mentioned earlier, we've got one of the high level dry docks, which allows us to build some of the larger ships in the game. We've also got Carthaginians raiding the area, and that's going to be pretty much a permanent fixture here, because I can't be bothered to find forces to go and take these guys out, and the local people don't really seem to mind having all this raiding going on for some reason. So anyway, we reach the docks at Eol, and you can see we've got a large selection of ships to build, including siege ships and the massive assault ships with high quality marines on board. So we're going to get a load of those, because now Carthage basically have control of the seas. This could prove an issue in terms of them blocking my trade. I really hope they don't do that, because we're massively economically dependent on trade right now. So now it's time for the Daemons of Polemos to continue their little sea journey. Luckily for them, they don't need to be at sea for very long, so the fact we've lost control of the water isn't going to make a big difference. So we land here on Corsica, and next turn I'll be able to move on and start laying siege to the settlement itself. Now I realise that the Roman allies that I've built for myself aren't actually going to help me in this war unless I ask them to come and join some of my wars, so I'm going to ask them to go to war against Illyria and Carthage. I always check if factions want to be my client state, because sometimes it surprises you and factions do actually want to be your client state and will pay you a lot of money for it, which is very handy. But anyway, I had to give these guys some cash to incentivize them joining the war, and the lowest amount was the amount they took, so that was very nice of them. And it's also kind of useful to give Rome cash, because it's like an injection into the economy of one of my allies, so it might actually help them out. So there we go, Rome will hopefully help me in the future wars, but right now we need to continue our own actions. Cronos can now auto-resolve his way into Brundisium. It wasn't the best auto-resolve in the world. There still were some survivors, since so many of the enemy troops in the last battle weren't really taking part in the combat and were just sitting on the edge of the map. They all survived the fight, but now they are finished off. So the settlement is taken, a very nice capture for us. Now someone mentioned there was a really good area of recruitment ranged unit you could get here. There were a couple of special area of recruitment units, but I couldn't see a ranged one. It's possible because this is an old version of the mod, it's not actually in it, and it was in a newer one they were thinking of, but anyway, still, might get some of these units because they do look kind of nice.
Every month it is more they ask for. Where are we to find all these slaves? Their answer would be that surely our own children would do the job. The insanity of our arrangement is clear as a holy spring. We pay the Massalians to protect us from harm. Yet here we are all wishing there was someone else we could pay to protect us from the Massalians. Or better yet, to grow a pair and go back to protecting ourselves, like proud men, like the kinds of men that walk with the gods in eternity. Although it is me speaking, I see that all of you think the same. The nearest Massalian army is a year from here, and their wars consume their gold, most of it our gold in truth. Has there ever been a better time to blow the dust from your sword?
Cleandros has been preparing to make an attack on Illyria's core territories, and now it's time to start with that. We'll move down and lay siege to this coastal settlement. It does have a navy inside it, which is boosting their power on the balance bar, so we can't just storm in, but there's a decent chance they'll just leave during the end turn sequence, and then we can. The Illyrians in the east have been taking territory from Sparta, yet again conquering into Macedonia. Sparta still have nothing really set up to prevent them from taking more of their lands as well, so need to keep an eye on that, but if we can conquer into Illyria's core, that of course won't matter too much. Now we also have a fleet led by Pyrrhus, which I was heading down here towards Egypt to try and find some trade to blockade. Unfortunately, there's a massive Egyptian fleet docked there on the coast, and there's another one at Alexandria. So we're actually in massive trouble here. My plan to come down and just blockade their ports definitely isn't going to work. I assumed that since I hadn't seen any Egyptian fleets moving around that they didn't have any, but turns out they did have them, they just weren't using them for anything. So we are now going to have to try and run away, and we could risk losing that fleet by being attacked by both of the enemy's fleets at once. Now I noticed the Athenians were for some reason buddying up with the Egyptians here. It reminded me that Athens aren't actually helping me in my wars. They are technically at war with Carthage, not that that's leading to anything. I asked them to declare war on Egypt, because that would be a much more practical war for them to fight, because their Egyptian territory is right next to them, of course. And unfortunately for me, they were unwilling to join the war even with a massive cash bonus, so that is a big shame. Now in Mesopotamia, I'm having a look around with my spy here, trying to work out what's going on with the Egyptian dispositions. We saw previously they had like 3 stacks in the area. Right now there's only 1 sitting at Edessa, and a Spartan army that's damaged trying to run through for some reason. Epaphroditos is getting close to getting involved in this battlefront, so we should be about to gain an advantage here if Egypt really don't have any more armies in the area. Once Epaphroditos arrives, we should be able to just take Hatra by auto-resolve, and then we'll storm on to fight their main force. The other question was what I should do with Actor, who has conquered Charax. I was thinking maybe he should go into Arabia to help my allies against the Egyptians there, but I also wanted him to move north so that we could storm Mesopotamia faster and with more ease as well. There was a drought in Charax, so we had to get out of the region anyway, so I thought we might as well rush up to get out of Mesopotamia, and we can just about dodge into Ecbatana here, which is Media Magna. And this gives me a couple of advantages, both taking no attrition because now we're technically not in that drought, and I can replenish because I'm still in friendly territory, and I'm in a position where I can rush down to help near Hatra if anything happens during the end turn sequence. Now I was thinking that this whole war isn't quite edgy enough. It's actually going quite easily, and more easily than I thought it would, so I thought I might try and raise the stakes in some way, and it would make sense that our barbarian client states and allies might not be too happy about keeping the status quo while Massalia continues to expand. We've got the Cimbri, the Scordisci, and the Namnates, who aren't our client state but just our ally here. The Namnates really don't like me, so I thought let's try and force this issue. First, I'm going to ask them to declare war on Carthage, just to see if they are willing to pledge their support to me, and they were not, as expected, since they only had a low chance of taking it. So in response to this, we are going to give them a couple of sanctions. We are going to not allow them to have military access anymore and get rid of our non-aggression pact. We definitely don't want that, because we want to bait some of these guys into being aggressive. So we'll have to basically see how this works. I'm not going to explicitly declare war on them. I'd rather that they declared war on me. I want them to have some initiative and independence in this particular conflict. There's also the Iceni to think about, who have for a long time been really hostile towards us, and I've got armies on our border, loads of armies in fact, but just haven't done anything with them. So maybe it's time to push them over the edge as well. We're trading right now. The trade isn't worth all that much, so I'm willing to give it up for the spirit of decreasing our relations, an unusual diplomatic move. So there we go. Now I was also thinking maybe I would disown the Scordisci as my client state, since they are quite powerful, their forces are all over my territory, and that could be a very interesting situation if they in fact did want to go to war with me. The only problem with this is that our trade and client state agreements are worth a lot of money, and right now the income I get from trade and client state tributes is basically most of my income, because my empire maintenance is above 100%, meaning my tax rate is effectively 0. So I do need these client states just to stay afloat. So because of that, I decided to wait a turn and see if anything interesting happened with the Namnates and Iceni, and then if nothing really ramps up, we'll go back to the Scordisci and once again start to antagonize them. Now in Iberia, we're just going to continue the relatively easy conquests, with Eurysthenes and Nothus just finishing off these Carthaginian settlements. There's 3 to take, that's 1, so there's 2 more, and I don't believe there are any Carthaginian actual armies around here, so it's really just a case of ganging up on them so we can get a nice auto-resolve. So over time, we're almost guaranteed to take Iberia now. The Egyptians continue to destroy my Arabian allies. The Bactrians keep moving forces slowly west. It seems like they want to get involved in this war eventually. And the Athenians make a quite kind offer. They say they'll go to war with Illyria for 8,000, and that's quite a nice deal. So that sort of makes up for them refusing to go to war with Egypt, at least a little bit. Don't know how useful they're really going to be. And now finally we get to the Illyrian turn. There's a massive delay, which means something's happening. And indeed they're bringing an army to fight with Cleandros. So rather than running away with their navy to make this an easier time, they've actually brought in an army to make it a harder time. So they have a gigantic advantage on the balance bar, mostly due to numbers, but we've seen this battle before really. I'm pretty confident we're going to win, especially with the shields of the city being so elite. So we're probably not going to spend too much time on this one, unless it goes very differently to how I think it's going to do, but we'll have a look into that next time. Ever since the beginning of the Drachma Wars, trade ships travelling to and from Massalia had been forced to take long routes to avoid the Carthaginian-controlled coasts of Iberia, Africa, Corsica and Sardinia. Although the coasts became less dangerous as Massalian dominance spread over land, the sea lanes themselves were increasingly patrolled by Carthaginian raiders and pirates, going unchallenged after the Massalian fleet was obliterated after being trapped right outside the docks of Carthage itself. With lines of supply and communication between the Republic's official statesmen and the various colonies becoming nearly non-existent, many people started to wonder whether they were even still a part of the aloof state.